So I get a lot of DMs asking me to make things. Every so often, one of them does catch my eye. And this time, the one that caught my eye wasn't really such a crazy thing per se. This person asked me to make jalapeno vinegar. You know, I could just take jalapenos, put them in vinegar, let them sit for a bit, and then call it jalapeno vinegar. But I wanted to make this a little more in my style. So in this video, I'm gonna see if I can make a brewed jalapeno apple cider vinegar. And to do that, I've got some 100% apple juice and I've got some fresh jalapenos. And we're gonna combine these with a little bit of brewing yeast and see if we can make a jalapeno vinegar. So let's get into it. These jalapenos on the skin, that's gonna be lots of wild bacteria and yeast, and I don't really want that to interfere. I want this to be a clean fermentation. So I'm gonna boil them, which should sanitize it pretty well. So I have my 1 kilogram of jalapenos all cut up, and let's add 1 liter of apple juice, or as much apple juice that will go in. I buy specifically this apple juice because it is 100% just apple juice, not from concentrate, and it tastes great. I've also made apple cider from this apple juice, including apple cider vinegar, and every time it just tastes really, really good. This actually smells really nice already. I just touched my nose and it's a little bit warm, so I know this is gonna be spicy, but I do just wanna try some. Yep, that is gonna be spicy, right? I'm gonna bring this up to a boil and then let it sit for about a minute or two, and then we'll cut the heat. I'll add a little bit more apple juice just to cool things down, then we'll filter it, and then we'll add our yeast. And if you're wondering why I decided to use apple juice, I could have just made like a jalapeno water mix with a bit of sugar, fermented that, and then turned that into vinegar, but I kind of wanted to make it a little bit more natural, I guess. And apple cider vinegar felt like the logical thing to use. I don't have to add any extra sugar. I can just ferment the sugar that's in the apple juice, and it will be enough to make like a nice, decently strong vinegar with that sort of like apple cider flavor too. I feel like this would just turn out way more delicious. This is no rinse brewing sanitizer. I keep it in a spray bottle because it just makes it so much easier to just spray down containers before you ferment. So I did just decide against filtering this, and I think during the fermentation stage, having the jalapeno pieces in there as well could add a little bit more like nutrients and flavor for the yeast, and hopefully get a better product. This is still a little bit too warm, I think, to add our yeast, so I'm gonna let this cool down for a bit, and then we'll add our yeast. And then we'll close it up, add the airlock, and just set it fermenting. So it looks like I didn't record any of the audio from that one little session. But what we've done is we've taken the jalapeno apple cider, which is cooled down completely. I've put ale yeast in it, and I'm using this Saf Ale US 05 ale yeast. And in my experience, this creates a nice clean ferment. And I really wanted to just bring out that like jalapeno flavor without too much yeastiness. So I'm gonna use this. And I've set it somewhere fairly cool that won't like fluctuate too much in temperature. And in my experience with apple ciders, it's gonna take about 2 weeks to ferment. Maybe there's some added sugar from the jalapenos as well, but I'm gonna give this 2 weeks, check in on it. We'll check the sugar levels to just make sure it's completely fermented dry, maybe give it a taste, and then we can start the process of turning it into vinegar. It's been now probably like 2.5 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks since we started fermenting the apple juice and the jalapenos, and I'm pretty sure this is finished fermenting now. Just to make sure it's completely fermented, I'm gonna do another sugar check. I'm so curious to see how this tastes as well. It actually smells all right, kind of smells like a hot sauce, to be honest, already. Oh, incredibly spicy. Not incredibly spicy, it's quite spicy. It is dry though, so that does give me hope that this is completely fermented through and we can start turning this into vinegar. Yep, we've completely fermented dry. So now there's no more sugar left in here, although it kind of did have like a residual sweetness. But I do know now that we can just basically start turning this into vinegar. I don't really want to keep a lot of these chili bits in the bottom here, so I'm gonna run this through a filter and then we'll transfer it to another container where we can let it ferment. Just gonna push as much juice out of these chilies as I can. Now that we filtered this out, it's time to turn this into vinegar, and I'm gonna show you sort of like my little contraption that I came up with to make sure this turns into vinegar faster. Now, if you don't wanna do this, you can just take this, put cheesecloth over it, and then just let it sit for weeks or months, and it should eventually all turn into vinegar. What I'm gonna do here is basically gonna take this method and turbocharge it, because to make vinegar, you need oxygen. And leaving the lid open, like that exposes it to oxygen, and that's, you know, enough to turn into vinegar eventually. But by using this method, we can basically just inject the oxygen straight into it, keep it super aerated, and this should just speed up this vinegar making process. So what I've got is the lid to this container, which I've poked a couple holes in. So there's 2 holes, one up here, one down here. And then I've got a piece of food grade airline. And I'll show you what I'm gonna do with this. First thing, I'll put the lid on. And I got my airline, and I'm gonna poke it through one of these holes until it kind of reaches pretty much the bottom. So this is where our air is gonna go in. But if air goes in, it needs to come out again. Now I could just leave this hole open and put a cheesecloth over this just to keep it covered, make sure nothing goes in. But what I do like to do is just put an airlock on with a bit of sanitizing solution. Close that up. So this is something that I keep in my fermentation area. This is a fish aquarium pump, air pump. It does have a little filter built in at the bottom there, and it's got 2 exit holes, and I can adjust the power as well. I spent a little bit more money on this one because I wanted that power adjust on it. And then I've just got a bit of this airline tubing. And because this is aquarium grade equipment is generally food grade as well, because, you know, you're still using it with like fish and stuff, so you don't want any like toxic chemicals. This is how I adapted this airline fitting to fit this bigger food grade airline fitting, and it's just with like a one-way air valve, which at the bottom I've wrapped some tape around just to make it a bit thicker. Here's a better look at that one-way air filter. You can tell which way the air has to flow because of this arrow that's on the plastic outside. And then there's the little bit of tape. I just used masking tape here because I didn't have any Teflon tape, but ideally Teflon tape would work better and create like a much better airtight seal, but it's not something I'm too concerned with. And part of what makes this really fun for me is just how sort of like DIY this is. So, and to be honest, that's quite tight already, just using tape. I'm gonna bring my whole sort of like setup over here to the fermentation station, where I've got this tray. I set up my air pump in the back here. I just hide it back here where it's out of sight. I've got it connected to this, which is kombucha. And then now I've got it connected to my jalapeno apple cider vinegar. Because kombucha also requires oxygen, this pump also makes this kombucha ferment like 5 times faster. So that's why I have it set up here. And to be honest, if anyone is making kombucha, I do very much recommend this sort of setup for making kombucha too. We'll plug that in, and straight away, I don't know if you can see it, let's zoom in. We've got our air coming out the bottom there. I like to send it right down to the bottom so that it's really just aerating everything. And then the airlock is just gonna make sure nothing can get in. And I sort of love like the sort of like home science, laboratory evil scientist kind of vibe that this gives, especially with the sound it makes as well. It's kind of like, it's like having running water in the studio too, but like a nice little water feature. So if I was to just leave this without the bubbling, this could take a few months to turn into vinegar, but I'm hoping with this setup, this could only take a few weeks. And, you know, I might also just spike this with a bit of raw apple cider vinegar as well, just to sort of get that mother in there and really like guarantee that we have a successful vinegar. So I'll have to grab that vinegar from home. But for now, if you don't have any raw vinegar, just aerating this or just even leaving it out to spoil should give you vinegar eventually. I think it's probably been like a month that this has been bubbling away, turning into vinegar hopefully. So let's open it up, let's try it out. Let's see if it's actually turned into vinegar. So there is a lot of calm yeast on this, which is not really a bad thing. You know, it's not super pretty, but I'm gonna try and remove as much of this as possible and try to get this that's looking clear. Now this would just take way too long, so I've got to figure out something else. I mean, I've managed to get rid of most of the cum yeast, but there's still like this white stuff on top, which you can see, and the only way I can think about filtering this out is with coffee filters, but this is going to take a while to do it like this. So I've got to figure something out. What I am going to do first though is cold crash this. I'm going to put this in the fridge for a few days, maybe 2 or 3. Hopefully that should settle this all down and start clearing this up. And then once that's cleared up, I'm going to skim the clear stuff off top. And in the meantime, try and figure out another solution. I can't really say at this point how long this has been going for because it's been like a month or 2 since I added the apple cider vinegar to this jalapeno apple cider vinegar. And then I decided to also run air through it as well, just to speed up the whole process. So that's what you saw me taking out that tube in the lid. As you can see, I mean, there's a lot of bubbles, but that's just because the air has been going through there. But there's also a mother forming at the top there, which we'll pull that out in a minute, but you can see there's a nice mother forming at the top there. It smells a little weird, a little sweet. It doesn't really smell vinegary, so I'm wondering if it actually is vinegar yet, but I feel like this has had enough time to turn into vinegar, especially with that apple cider vinegar seed. So let's filter this through. I've also gone and ordered a whole bunch of fun stuff here, which should hopefully help us to get this vinegar looking really crystal clear. So I've got a whole bunch of filters here. It's probably too big, but we'll figure it out. So we can filter this through and try get an ultra clean, ultra clear vinegar. That has got to be one of the least appealing vinegar mothers I've ever seen. And this smell is like really just something weird, like I've never smelled anything like this before. Check this out. That's not nice at all. I'm probably just gonna throw this out because I don't really plan on making more jalapeno vinegar after this. This little setup that I have right in front of me is what I'm going to be using to try and filter this vinegar to try and make it as clear as possible. I've got my regular kegging setup with my plastic keg and my gas. This is just CO2 gas, but instead of carbonating the vinegar, what we're gonna be doing, we're gonna be using this gas to put pressure into this bottle, which will push this vinegar out through this hose, through this filter, which is a 20 micron filter, which is kind of like a coffee filter. That should filter out the vinegar, which should push it back into this jar here, where we should get filtered vinegar. I don't know if this is gonna work very well, but let's give it a try. Don't need too much pressure at all, to be honest. Just a little bit, just to be able to push this liquid through. Okay, I think we have flow. And we're leaking. Hold up, where is that leaking from? Could be because I am using this upside down. I really can't tell if that is being filtered or not, because it looks kind of the same as coming out as it does going in. Then again, 20 microns. I don't know if that's gonna be fine enough for this. We're gonna do another round, but we'll go finer. So that is round 1 of filtering, and it looks basically the same. So let's do another round at a finer filter. I say we go for it and we go straight down to 5 microns and just see how that does. I was gonna do this in steps all the way down to 5 microns, but you know what? I just want to see what happens if we just go straight down to 5 microns. I'm still getting too much sediment, which is what I'm confused about. I feel like maybe it's just skipping the filter somewhere here. So it seems like this is as fine as I can get it with that system. I think I'm doing something completely wrong, or it just doesn't work. But I figured at 5 microns, it'd be a bit clearer than that. So you know what, let's do this the old fashioned way. Let's just do good old coffee filters. Not super promising. It seems as though maybe just the particles that are in this are just super fine. So my last ditch effort is to cold crash this now. So let's see if that works. That's been cold crashing in the fridge now for like 2 days. And I will say we've managed to clear up a bit of the sediment, but as you can see, it's not completely clear. At this point, I could just keep going, but I want to give this a taste now and actually see if we've made vinegar. I haven't actually tasted this yet. It smells weird. It doesn't smell like vinegar, but it had a vinegar mother in it. So I suspect it's probably got some vinegariness to it. So let's try this out. It's like a weird floral smell that's not super pleasant, but let's give this. And that doesn't taste like vinegar at all. So what happened? How is that not vinegary at all? It's not spicy at all. It tastes like bean water, and it's actually generally really unpleasant. I don't know why I just spent like 3 or 4 months making this. Of course, not everything has to work out on this channel. I would actually say if you want to just make spicy vinegar, just put some chilies into some vinegar and let it steep, but that would essentially just be hot sauce. Regardless, I do not recommend that you do this at home yourself because that tasted horrible. That's it for this video. If you've got any more ideas, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I'll see you next time.